Greetings everyone, Brett here with Hammerhead Model Making, back with another full build video. Today we're going to be taking a look at the Hobby Boss 1/72nd scale UH-1B Huey. This is the classic version of the Huey, however we're going to add a little bit of a twist, and we're going to do this one up in markings for the Honduran Air Force. This is an interesting little kit. We got a little bit of aftermarket for it in the way of some 3D printed decals. Now these are actually meant for a different brand. This is actually meant for a Italeri brand, but I think we're going to be able to make them work with the Hobby Boss. So typical with most aircraft type models, we're going to start with the interior, and Hobby Boss does an okay job providing interior details. So you get, cabin floor, you get the back wall here with a little bit of soundproofing texture on it, and you do get actually some fairly decent controls in the cockpit considering the scale. However, because we're going to be doing the 3D decals, we're going to go ahead and remove those nice details. So I'm just using my hobby blade here, and then I'll come over with a little bit of sandpaper just to clean that up a little bit. We can go ahead and start assembling some of the internal structure here. So there are multiple areas through which you see interior detail from the outside. One of those areas happens to be like up in the nose at the pilot's feet. So we're going to get those details added in. Now I apologize, I am not a helicopter guy, so I couldn't tell you cyclic, collective, what all these are, but we're going to get them in there. And I think the center one is cyclic. I think the one on the side is collective, and then the feet are the anti-torque pedals. I could be wrong, feel free to correct me down in the comments below, but like I said, I'm not super into helicopters, so I don't know all the terminology. Here we can go ahead and build up the rest of the compartment here. So this structure in the back here really just kind of builds up for the engine area, and you don't get any kind of engine detail, so just be aware. But it's really meant just to kind of lift up so that you can add the transmission and the main rotor. We're also going to remove the molded on detail from the instrument panel. Again, it's actually not bad, all things considered. This is one of like Hobby Boss's more like simple type kits in the scale, but nevertheless, we do have some fairly decent detail in here. So we're going to go ahead and add the anti-torque pedals. This is the seat that goes in the back of the cabin here. Out of the box, it's really simple, just a couple little supports, and then it fits into the back wall here. There's very little actual detail on it here, so good thing we have the 3D decals because those will help us out. So here's the main rotor and the transmission housing, so they fit in there so that you can actually, and if you glue it right, you can make it so that the rotor can't spin if that's something that is important to you. And we'll go ahead and get the transmission installed into the cabin here, so it also doubles as part of the back wall there. And and we can go ahead and move on to painting. So we went ahead and because pretty much everything in the compartment is black, and it seemed kind of silly to prime it black and then paint it black on top of that, I just went ahead and went straight to painting it using some of the Tamiya NATO black. I like the NATO black because it's not like pure black. It just helps in the process of weathering and making it look used. And because I know I'm not going to do any kind of masking in here and whatnot, I didn't even worry about the primer here. I just went straight to the paint. So we'll go ahead and get everything. This is essentially the primer level is what you could say. We're going to go ahead and get everything painted here, including the inside of the fuselage parts, because there is a lot of open, from the sidewalls and the cockpit things where you could see in. You don't want to see any bare plastic in there. So we'll go ahead and get that all painted up, and then we can start working on doing some detail painting. So right now I'm just doing a little bit of a gray dry brush everywhere, and it's a pretty heavy dry brush as well. So this is just going to help me when it basically it'll add a layer of weathering, but also help me pick out details and add a little bit of like an edge highlight essentially to a lot of these details. And I think it just helps the overall look. You could definitely push this even further. I wasn't going super heavily weathered on this. This is a commission build, and the client was expecting like a nice looking helicopter, but we have to show a little bit of wear, a little bit of activity in there. And you can see how the dry brush really helps pick out a lot of those details, like on the soundproof padding, things like that. Here's the main pilot and co-pilot seat, instrument panel. So everything just gets a dry brush, and this is like a medium gray. You could go with like a light gray as well, but it's gonna contrast a lot with the black, and I didn't need a lot of contrast. And I'm gonna go back and repaint the center console part because the black of like the instruments is different than the black of the rest of the helicopter. So I'm going back. This is a pure black, and this will look nice once we get the 3D decals on it, and just help provide a little bit of visual interest and contrast inside the cockpit. Again, because everything is just black, it just helps break things up a little bit and not make it all uniform, and everything gets lost and everything else. And as I was doing this, and I'm constantly looking at reference pictures, trying to understand things better, and I noticed that most of the time the back wall had like a green color on the soundproofing fabric. So go ahead and repaint over that, get that nice little green in there. And this is good because it helps just give us like a extra pop of color in there. Like I was just mentioning how everything else is black. So now we go ahead and apply the 3D decals. Now they are technically decals, water slide decals, but I've just found that it's better to get a more secure fit. So I just use super glue. You could also use PVA glue as well. That definitely gives you more like working time in terms of positioning, but for me the super glue works just fine. I really didn't have to do a lot of trimming, adjusting to get the 3D decals to fit to the Hobby Boss kit. Like I said, they're meant for an Italeri kit. The only area where I had some trouble was the seats cushions, but was able to get through that. And the 3D decals are spectacular. It's a great addition to the model making toolkit, and I'm really pleased with them. So here's the cushions for the back seat here, and again, this provides us seatbelt detail, all kinds of great details to add into our kit, and it's really easy to apply. Essentially, just do it like you would any other water slide decal, and then just a little bit of extra super glue. So here you can see getting the cockpit all put together. With the 3D decals, everything really pops in here, and I was quite pleased with how it was turning out and looking. So at this point, we can go ahead and start test fitting the cockpit into the fuselage halves, and I was very pleasantly surprised that everything fit perfectly and no issues with the fit there. So now we can go ahead and move on to getting everything put together and ready for painting. So we're going to go ahead and get the fuselage all put together, start off with installing the cockpit, and excuse me. Again, like I just mentioned, the fit here is great. There are some fairly hefty seams. For how small the kit is, the plastic is quite thick, and so the seams are somewhat prominent, but a little bit of extra thin cement and a little bit of pressure holding these parts together, and they actually end up going together pretty good, and cleanup is pretty minimal. There's not a ton of surface detail on this kit, so when it comes to like sanding these seams, you don't really have to worry about sanding away a lot of detail. There's a few panel lines and a few rivets, but it's all fairly easy to do. I went ahead and did the seam work off camera, but it's my standard procedure. I hit it with the file first and then slowly work my way up the grades of sandpaper until I get a nice, good, smooth finish. Really needed very minimal filler, just a couple places. You can see a couple little spots there on the bottom where I used some filler, but otherwise, this thing really just kind of, once you get the fuselage halves together, the whole rest of the kit just kind of falls together. And a lot of the small details are there. They're quite nice. Getting the main rotor blades together. This is all just like a one piece affair for the main rotor. Do have to clean up some sprue nubs there, but test fitting onto the rotor shaft there. Everything fit how it was supposed to, and no complaints there. So test fitting here was important though, just because I had to make sure how the parts aligned for the rotor, but otherwise it all worked out. I do like the way that Hobby Boss did the clear parts here for the canopy, where it's one giant section and it breaks along natural panel lines. It just makes it really easy than trying to have to install like each individual window, and it just makes cleaning up seam lines easier, and just overall much better process. The one downside to it is if you want to have like the pilot doors open, you would have to do some surgery both with the clear part and the fuselage to have the pilot's doors open. So, trade off there. The ease of construction versus the options. So the side doors, we're going to go ahead and close up the side doors. We're not going to have them open, but because the windows are pretty large and the clear parts are quite nice. They're quite clear. You'll be able to see inside and see a lot of that nice detail that we put in there. The doors fit really nicely. They kind of snap into place. We go ahead and glue this door on, but we're not going to glue the other door on. And the reason I decided not to glue the other door on, at least during this process, because I was concerned that little bits of dust or overspray might get inside the cabin, and I wanted to be able to have access to it so I could clean the clear parts in the event that happened. So I'm just using a little bit of blue tack here to secure the door in place, but not permanently. Moving on to masking, we're just using some standard cellophane tape from the dollar store, and with a brand new fresh blade, we're going to lightly cut around the window pieces. Fortunately, the Hobby Boss kit has quite a nice sharp definition between the clear parts and the canopy frame, so doing this was fairly simple and straightforward. But it's just a process. It's just a matter of going around and getting all your clear parts messed up here. So again, it's key to be using a brand new fresh blade here that it will cut through the cellophane tape like it doesn't exist. But if you have a dull blade or an old blade, it'll start tearing and you're just going to cause yourself problems and headaches. So absolutely use a fresh blade when doing this kind of masking, and it doesn't take a lot of pressure to cut through the cellophane tape, so you really don't need to be pushing hard with your knife and potentially gouging out your clear parts. So that's why I like the cellophane tape, because it is so easy to cut. But I usually only reserve the cellophane tape to smaller projects like this, and the cellophane struggles on compound curves, like for example the clear parts underneath the bottom of the nose. So I use different tapes for those. So now we've gone ahead and primed everything black. We're going to go ahead and start applying our main color. So we are doing essentially what is like a slightly modified SEA camo, so the Southeast Asia type camo scheme. And so for that, I'm using the standard colors I've used on all of my other SEA camo projects, and these are Ammo MIG paints. So I thin these, I would say roughly 25 to 30% thinner, the rest paint, and that gets me a nice good even coat. So now we're going to use some blue tack here, poster tack, whatever you call it, to mask off the camouflage patterns. Now, if I was doing this at a larger scale, I would most likely do freehand for doing the camo, but at this scale, and with how complicated the surface is, I figured it'd just be easier to use putty to mask off the camouflage areas. The nice thing about the putty is because it has a thickness to it, and the rounded edges, that you do get a little bit of like a softer edge than if you were using masking tape, for example. So you still get a little bit of a soft edge, but I think in the long run, this process is going to be better for the camouflage that I want to achieve with this. So right now we're covering up all the areas that we want to remain brown. And then we're going to move on to our camo green color and spray all of the exposed areas in the camo green. Unfortunately, the camo green is pretty similar to the earth tone that we just used, so it covers pretty easily and quickly without too much fuss. Don't need a huge thick layer of it, which helps us just to avoid like raised lines between the different colors, things like that. So we go ahead, get that all painted up. And you'll notice like I'm holding one part of the model, paint that side. I'll let it sit for 10-15 minutes and then spray the remaining part that I was holding before. Now for the darker green, I'm using RLM 81 and a little bit of satin black, and this is going to give us our darker green color. So we go ahead and we've already masked off the camo green areas that we want remaining. So we've done 2 layers of masking at this point, and go ahead and get the darker green sprayed on. Just basically the same process we used for all the other stuff. So this color, these paint combinations for the SEA camo really is just my favorite. I love using these colors, and I'm really happy with how they turned out. So once the paint has a little bit of time to cure, I don't need to wait till it to fully cure. Just essentially dry to the touch. I can go ahead and start moving all the masking and get that all taken off and reveal our nice, lovely camouflage pattern. The reference pictures I was going off of were were really interesting. Just how big the splotches are compared to how small the helicopter is. So at this point, I was also painting some of the smaller bits like the rotors and the rocket pods that go on the side. So with all the separate individual parts painted, I could start assembling them before moving on to like the clear coat and everything. So that's what we're doing here, is we're just assembling all of the pre-painted, or the parts that I painted off earlier for some of the smaller pieces. And so this one obviously is armed with the rocket pods. The kit does come with 2 different rocket pod options, these round ones and then square ones, as well as different gun, like minigun type options. So just be aware that you do have a few options. For the tail rotor, the reference picture showed a white and red alternating stripe on the tail rotor, and I probably could have masked these off and painted them and sprayed them, but they're just so small, and I figured it was just going to be faster and easier just to do it by hand. So we go ahead and start with the white color, and then we do our red bands. And yeah, pretty straightforward. At this point, I also got a visitor. So this is Onyx, and he occasionally likes to come and make sure that I'm giving you guys quality work. So with all the painting done, we can go ahead and move on to gloss coating. So I'm using the Alclad Aqua Gloss, and this is cut about 40% thinner, 60% gloss with Tamiya X20A thinner. And this is going to prepare us for decals and weathering. Now, like I said earlier, not really going heavy on weathering, just very light, essentially, basically just a panel wash. Decals are pretty straightforward and simple. The national flag here that I'm installing on the tail, that comes from a company called Aztec Models. They're out of Mexico, and they provide a lot of decals for like Central America and South American Air Forces. So a lot of subjects that aren't like popular in mainstream scale modeling, they offer a lot of great decal options for people in or for subjects of South American, Central American origin. So pretty much for all of the Honduran Air Force kits that I've been doing so far, I'm getting my decals from them. Now, so the flag and the FAH, they come from Aztec Models. I was modeling very specific numbers on these aircraft, and so I had to scour my spare decals for all the numbers that I needed, and I was really struggling trying to find like the numbers that I need. And then I realized every decal sheet has tons of numbers on them. These are actually the numbers that are used to identify which decals to use on your model. So I was able to essentially cobble together all the numbers that I needed for the aircraft, because I do numbers on the nose and then on the fuselage as well. And so it's just kind of this fun little moment. Like, oh yeah, I have tons and tons of number decals on every decal sheet that I have saved. There are tons of numbers. So it was kind of a fun little revelation that I was able to get all the numbers that I needed, get enough that matched and looked good. So with all the decals on, we can go ahead and hit it with some Solvaset. This is just going to help those decals conform and snuggle down to the surface of the model really nicely. It helps to avoid silvering, things like that. So it's important to get a good coat of the Solvaset on. Now, if you've never used Solvaset before, test it out before you do, because it's pretty hot, and if you're not careful, you can melt decals with it. So just be aware. So we've gone ahead and gloss coated over everything again, over the decals, and now we can give it a panel wash. And for this, we're just using my favorite, the dark brown wash for green vehicles. We're going to go ahead and get everything essentially covered with the wash. And this is really going to be it for our, quote unquote weathering. It's just basically doing a panel wash here. And because there are some panel lines and rivet details, it will help break things up a little bit and make some of those nice engraved details pop. And yeah, so once the wash dries, usually takes about 30 minutes depending on how heavy you apply it, then we can just wipe off the excess with a cotton bud And what's nice is you can do it dry. You don't need any kind of solvent on there to wipe this off. If you have applied it on pretty heavy and there's areas where it's being a little more stubborn, you could put a little bit of mineral spirits on there to get that off, but I wouldn't go too far. So now we can go ahead and matte coat everything. And knock down that shine, seal in all of our work, and allow us to move on to the next steps here. So this is the Vallejo matte coat, and I like it. So at this point, we can kind of start bringing all of our little sub-assemblies together, remove the masking, things like that. Fortunately, I did not have any overspray in the interior, and there was just a few little bits of sanding dust that I had to remove, so it was pretty easy to get my tweezers in there with a little bit of paper towel to clean those up. You can see here removing the masking. One of the problems with the cellophane tape is when you're removing it, it can be easy to rip. And there's been a few times where I've removed the masking and realized that I've actually peeled off the paint and left the tape on there. So just be aware of that. So here we can get the rocket pods installed. You can see there's a little bit of bare plastic on the bottom side of these rocket pods. That's where they were being held by the little alligator clips. I'll go ahead and address that a little bit later. But for now, we can get them installed on there. Get the tail rotor on. I like the color pop from the tail rotor here. Go ahead and get the windshield wipers painted. Very important. Don't want to be flying out there without windshield wipers. So got to be careful here. I definitely at this point I'm using this old brush and it's pretty tattered, and I need to upgrade that to a newer brush. But careful, steady hand, and a little bit of patience. What's nice though is so I'm using the Vallejo acrylic paint there, is if I mess up and I accidentally get paint on the windshield, just let it dry, and then you can take a toothpick and just rub that paint right off, and it'll come right off the clear part. So it's pretty forgiving. Here I'm painting the navigation lights on here. So we're gonna start with a white paint as a base coat, and then we're going to hit it with some Tamiya clear paints. So we've got our red paint here, and I love this combination for doing simple navigation lights like this with the white paint first and then the clear part on top. Really pops and looks nice. Go ahead and get the main rotor installed. I'm not permanently attaching this at this point because I will have to ship this, and so it's just easier to ship it without the main rotor attached. But that wraps up the build. So we'll go ahead and move on to our final reveal here. So if you've made it this far, thank you for sticking around. I know this video is a little bit shorter than the ones I've been putting out recently, but this was a fairly straightforward and quick build. I had a lot of fun doing this, and this is my first time ever doing a helicopter in 1/72 scale. It's pretty small. You may have noticed throughout the video that there was actually another helicopter in the background of some shots. I built this together with another helicopter, and that one's even smaller. I will have a video out for that one later. So, but yeah, I had a lot of fun with this. Turned out pretty nice. Hobby Loss has a decent little kit on their hands. I would definitely recommend it. It's pretty inexpensive as well. So, if you need a fun little helicopter, check it out. I would recommend it. So anyways, I would hope you would consider subscribing to the channel if you aren't already. Go ahead and hit the like button if you enjoyed the video. And let me know what you think down in the comments below. I enjoy interacting with you, so please leave me a note, leave me a message. Give me some feedback, let me know. And yeah, thanks for watching. Thanks for making it this far. Huge shout out to all of my patrons for helping to support this channel and allowing me to bring you this kind of content. I really appreciate them. And so if you're interested in supporting the channel, you can head down to the Patreon link below. Additionally, if you're not interested in supporting the channel on a monthly basis like Patreon, maybe consider going to my merch store, pick up a mug or a t-shirt with the Hammerhead branding on it, and that helped me out as well. Anyways, thanks everyone. Cheers. We'll see you on the next video.